Welcome to this new episode of the Business of AI. Today we have a special guest. His name is Padraig Coleman. It's the founder of Innovation on Demand. It's an innovative company that partners with organizations, small and big, to deliver complex strategic programs. And they are really expert in agile methodologies. Padraig, welcome to the Business of AI. How are you today?
I'm good, Luca. Thanks for having me.
Thanks. The pleasure is it's ours. I noticed that you had a number of roles in multinational companies in multiple sectors, like for instance Northern Trust, J&J, IBM, Fujitsu, yes, that you're an expert in agile methodologies and methodologies that can be applied to deliver complex research and development projects. Do you want to tell a little bit more about yourself to our audience, just to break the ice and start this very interesting conversation?
Sure. Yeah, absolutely. So I think when people ask me what I do kind of tend to use that phrase. I'm a builder, but I don't have a hard hat. So that's pretty much why organizations engage with my services. They have a problem, they have a challenge, they have something they need to resolve, and I will come in, and basically what we do is we'll help support to build a team using team members that are there in the organization already, and bringing in external team members and bringing in some of our own people into the team. And what we're really trying to do is we're trying to create a platform to launch success off of, and that is success for us is fixing a challenge, fixing a problem. And it can often start with actually even just defining and finding what that problem is. What you start out with a lot of organizations is they have a sense that either there's an opportunity that they're missing out on, or there's some extra customer value that they could be delivering, or maybe there's some threats to their organization that they see from other organizations, competition out there within their industry, competition from outside their industry. I mean, it is a competitive environment out there, and I think a lot of different companies are looking to find different ways to leverage their wider ecosystems to try and solve some of those problems without losing what they do, the core focus of their business. So they really want to focus on their business, and they want to get any of these technology challenges, any of these agile challenges. They want to get that expertise in and bring it in and embed it with their own organization. And that to me is the key of what innovation is. Innovation has often been defined as you're not really kind of creating anything that's terribly new. You're just bringing different aspects from different areas that you've learned along the way, and you're merging them together, and then you're formulating something that's new.
Excellent. And, this is the Business of AI podcast. So what we are going to try to do together is to understand how innovation works with AI, which is, still a very fuzzy concept for a lot of, our clients and probably your clients. So what we're going to try to do in this podcast, in this hour that we have together, is to, well, first of all, imagine demystifying AI, because, you have a lot of clients that probably think that they're already doing AI, but they aren't. Maybe they do data science or data analysis. And then we're going to try to understand together how, what are the best practices. And more importantly, we will learn what is design thinking and how we can apply design thinking in projects involving AI. But, first thing first, can you tell us a little bit more about what it means for you, AI innovation, and how do you start, a project where, there is a very pronounced R&D nature. So how do you start from the beginning of the project where there is an ambition and you get to a final delivery?
Yeah, sure. And so I think you start, again, probably start and you finish with the business, that's for sure. What the business challenge is, you start with, and your end point is the outcome. It's a positive outcome for the business. That's easy said, but done is a much different story, because it's very fuzzy, it's very grey. What you'll typically have maybe is like a business that's been exposed to some ideas that they've seen in various different conferences. So they've seen from various different service providers that have come into them, and they've seen some high-level concepts of what AI is. And they like it, and it's good. And undoubtedly, it is a technology that can provide efficiencies and optimizations in processes that are currently in place. And it can bring a whole new world to play as well with regards to just getting through the tons and tons of data and information that are out there that need to be processed in order to make good decisions in business. So um, this is where kind of design thinking comes into place. I suppose is one of my favorite concepts to use. It's to bridge that conversation, because there's two main actors in any innovation in the AI space. There's the technical actor and there's the business actor, and they speak two foreign languages. So one speaks Italian and one speaks English. It is trying to bridge that gap is difficult. And you need to first of all get the different technical resources in the different areas to realize that there's a gap there, because technologists, they're really passionate about their area, they're really passionate about what AI can do, they're really passionate about what machine learning algorithms can do, and they will talk to the ends of the earth about what these technologies can do and what they can bring, but they're very focused on the technical aspects, the technical abilities, the technical capabilities of these. Whereas business people, my main domains in the past have been in finance and pharmaceutical, and they care about the customer. They care about value delivery. They don't really, in their hearts, they don't care about the technology. They know they need to have it to get advantage from it. They know it's competitive advantage. They know it's crucial. They know it's critical. From all sorts of digital technologies, they know that in modern business today, to reach those customers, they need that technology. To reduce the cost of the product that they're delivering, if it's a financial product, and to scale it and to customize it to each customer. They know they can only do that to technology, because humans are limited in what they can do. Technology has other aspects that overcome some of those limitations. And they're the two different stories. They're the two different parts. And what you're doing with design thinking is you're trying to put a framework in place where you can get these guys to meet at a table and start to understand each other's perspectives. What I've seen an awful lot in the past is when you start a program or you start a project, it's very much focused on the business, the objectives, maybe there's a vision, there's objectives, there's a strategy, and it's very focused on these very high level concepts. And you can get some great energy in the first couple of weeks kicking off a project when it's linked into some corporate objective or some business objective, and you can get some real strong synergies and you can really get going. But projects tend to go on over a longer period of time, and as they go along over a longer period of time, that energy from an initial kind of setting the frame of the journey and where we want to be and what we need to achieve, that will dissipate in a day-to-day basis, and it's only through, I think, building these ways of conversing between technical and business domains that will actually create everyday bridges in conversation where we can keep those energy levels up on a regular basis, and we can keep business people can keep absorbing more and more information from the technology area, and vice versa. Technology areas can keep absorbing and learning more about how the business operates, and not only the technical aspects of the processes of the business or the technology, but also how the mindset is so different for somebody who's working in business versus somebody who's working with technology all day, where their perspectives are coming from. And what you're trying to do, I suppose, is you're really trying to bridge those perspectives, change those perspectives, that somebody who's very operationally focused in the business area and who just wants results can take a step back and understand that if I'm using a technology here, I'm going to have to train this technology. It's not going to start out with the 10 years of experience in business that I have. It's going to start out as an undergraduate that's just out of college, and it knows absolutely nothing about business. So I have to start from scratch. And you kind of have to accept that the results won't be terrific, initially after that. And it's a very hard thing for somebody who has 15, 20 years of core management experience, and they're very focused on KPIs and very high levels of accuracy and quality. Very hard for them to accept that we might have to start off with a lower quality level.
Sure. But that's a very interesting and fascinating topic, because I'm a techie. I've spent like 20 years in research, first in academia, then in corporate research. So I have a technical focused mindset, and a lot of my stakeholders have the opposite mindset, with the one that you mentioned, customer centric, customer focused mindset. So let's let's dive a little bit deeper into design thinking. Let's try to define what it is and what it is not, and more importantly, how does design thinking achieve this magic, which is combining these two opposing forces, technical on one side and customer centric on one side. So can you tell us a little bit more about what are the main steps in design thinking from beginning to towards the end of the project?
Sure. Sure, and this is design thinking for me. I think it's a real wide area, as is agile. They're real wide areas, and everybody has their own slant on it.
Mm-hmm.
And we like keeping the conversation open on these things. But for me, design thinking. So you start off, you have this challenge, you have this issue that the business have, and they're the sponsors, they're paying for it, and they bring this challenge. The first step to it is actually frame that challenge. So, is the challenge actually the challenge? Is the problem actually what the business is saying is the problem, or have we had a proper look at the problem? So the
Mm-hmm.
first session in design thinking that I would always have is that framing that challenge. And what we're kind of looking at in there is we're looking at the problem as a problem statement, and we're trying to formalize it using a proper theory, or sorry, a proper structured problem statement. So, we're using our description around what it is, when it's happened, what it is, when it's happened, who it affects. And then we're looking to analyze this process. And you might even recognize some of this from your academia days. It's the same process. You describe it, you analyze it, and you evaluate it. You go through that process with it, but you go through that process with both representatives, so both the business and the technology people at the board. So you're really starting to understand. The technologists are really quiet at this stage, because what you're really doing is you're listening to the business, you're listening to the problem they have, but you're also listening to the
Yeah.
context and the description and the texture around that problem. Because if you're listening and you're really absorbing that information, you will find key parts to the challenge which haven't even surfaced yet, but you will start to get information around it from here. And I've done this a lot of times, and I can guarantee you some of the conversation you will hear here in these very early parts, you will bring that up again later on and say, this is your problem, but this is the source. This is the root cause of your problem. We've seen it. We've investigated it.
This is a very interesting and crucial part of our conversation, because sometimes, in my experience, especially when it comes to AI, people focus on the wrong problem, and the wrong problem is a problem that doesn't bring enough value for my customers, or customers in general.
Yeah.
So how do you find the link? How do you let's say, how do you help the technical people to discover the most valuable problem, and how do you link it to business value? Because this is probably straightforward for the more commercial kind of stakeholders, or the ones that are more involved in the business. But for technical people, this is a struggle. So how do you do that?
Sure. I think the more you can outline the business visually, the process, the more you can actually visualize that journey. And these terms are becoming quite commonplace with journey maps and personas. But for me, those processes that the business currently use, the more you can document those. And I mean, with remote working today, Miro boards I think are fantastic for doing this type of thing. But the more you can actually write down that value stream, but not only do you want to document the processes, do you want to see where's the time being consumed in each process? Because that's the technologies where you can make the efficiencies and where those time has been consumed and what it's doing. So sometimes you'll have maybe a business analyst will come in and will document those processes at a very high level. But being humans, we'll take the best happy path, and we'll just look at that and we'll say, this is how our business works. It's not. The business might go down the happy path 10% of the time.
Mm.
The other 90% of the
Yeah.
time, the other 90% of the effort is spent resolving why it didn't go down the happy path. um, so we document the process. We analyze each sub process within it. We find out what the inputs are, what the outputs are. We really define it at quite a granular level, and it takes time. It takes effort, and you have to have the SMEs there. You have to have very experienced people from the business there, and that's one of the key challenges I've always found in these type of efforts. Is you get someone in there who has a particular focus in one area and they're driving the conversation in this area. You really need to have multiple people across the different business processes, so you can get that once and done effort and get it documented. And what you're doing is you're getting a visual of it, you're getting an understanding of how the information actually flows for this particular business process. Then you can do that for another business process on top of that if it's a linked business process. Then you get downstream processes, upstream processes. You're building out a map of not only how a business process works, but how these systems work together. And when you start to see the complexities of how these systems work together, and they are very complex for a reason, these are, the more customized you get, the more products you have out there, the more customers you're servicing, the more complexity you're going to have in the data you're getting in and the data you're manipulating throughout those processes. But once you have them mapped, then I think then you can start to really focus in on how the data is being mapped, what's triggering the pulls of the data from A to B. What's the requirement for a downstream process? What does it need in order to get started? Can it get started with a smaller subset of data? Does it really need every single process to be completed? Can it be done in parallel? These are the type of questions that we'll start asking of the business, and we'll start challenging their business processes. We'll start challenging the way they're working, because we now know, for instance, that we can pull data from a different source, from an external source to the business instantaneously. So we don't need to wait until some process is finished before the downstream process can. And sometimes you end up actually totally mixing those processes around, those sub processes.
And let's break it down then in these 3 steps. You mentioned reframing the challenge. First step, very important. Second is about mapping the process and also the data sources. And then third step is about challenging, the stakeholders, trying to, understand what are the strength and the weaknesses on the current architecture.
Yeah. And they're probably all they're all part of actually framing the problem. I mean, we're still at a very early stage here with regards to framing the problem. And for smaller processes, we can work through this in a 2-hour workshop. For larger processes, this might take 6 weeks to work through.
And you mentioned root cause analysis. This is probably one of the tools that you're using all the time within the delivery of your service. Is there other tools that you would like to recommend to our audience? And some of them are practical tools, but others are software tools, like for instance Miro dashboards. Do you have any other examples of these kind of tools?
Sure. Yeah. I mean, it's the age of tools. Miro dashboards. Yeah, I do find them fantastic. There's a tool called Session Labs I use to actually plan out these sessions, because I think if you don't actually sit down and plan these workshops properly and facilitate them, then they go awry and you end up losing a lot of time and not getting what you need out of the workshops. And I think with design thinking, it's quite an abstract concept, and you need to leave space for abstract thinking. But I do think you need to be how they're facilitated is key, because that's where a lot of organizations fail, or at least find challenges in running design thinking, is a lack of an experienced facilitator, because you really need to get from point A to point B and go through all the different stages that you need to get to in between as well. From a tooling point of view, so value streams, mapping value streams, that's definitely it's got kind of different terminologies, but value stream mapping, I think, is probably the main one that's used. That's definitely a key one for me. It's probably my go-to, really, I suppose, because that's exactly what I just outlined there. It's just documenting each and every sub-step of the process. You might want to use a SIPOC along with that, which it kind of has your supplier, your input, your process, your output, and your consumer. And that's a really good one from a technologist point of view, because you can really focus on what the data is, what the triggers are. Is it time driven? Is it event driven? You can really start, it's the nebulous of your architectural thinking. It's kind of, what am I going to use here? Is this Kubernetes again? Or is this some other technology, if you do have some sort of you have invested already in some sort of a base technology, a messaging, streaming messaging platform, you're going to start to figure out, what am I going to need to get this triggered? What am I going to need to get this to get these parts talking together?
Okay.
Never too early to start thinking about that, I don't think. There are a couple of tools that I'd use. Other than that, they're probably the main tools, Luca. Yeah.
Okay. And what we're going to do then is going to actually find the links and put them in the description below, so that
cool. Brilliant.
Our audience are going to be able to quickly retrieve them. Okay, so let's talk a little bit more about the third step, which is the challenge, the let's say the critique or the analytic part, where you break down the existing architectures and you kind of challenge your stakeholders. So what kind of cues or things you're looking at when you are into this phase? So you, obviously, one of them I imagine is efficiency. Another one is inefficiency or bottlenecks. What are the 2 or 3 things that you always look for in this phase?
Pain points, definitely. You're definitely looking for those as the core of the conversation. I think what you get a lot of as well is part of this is a form of art, really trying to get this conversation going, because what you have is, in business, you will have people who have been trained in a certain way since they came out of college and they went into business, and they've grown up in a certain culture, and working in finance and working in pharmaceutical, I know straight away, without talking to anyone, which company I'm in, which industry I'm in, by the way I talk to those people, because they're so different. And they recognize that themselves as well. It's not a slant on anything, but it's just a fact of nature. You get absorbed in the culture of these industries and the subcultures of these companies that work within these industries. But I think trying to get people to not have the solution in their head is a key one as well, I think, because what you're really trying to do is you're trying to be, again, we get back to design thinking, you're trying to be divergent here. You're really trying to get an explosion of ideas around the place. You're trying to really move from an A to B line of thought to a kind of a really messy, really gray, really unstructured, bringing in everything, and it just doesn't suit some personalities. Some people really struggle with it, and some people just love it. Some people live in the gray areas, but what you're really trying to do is, for that problem, you're trying to find all the different aspects that are part of it. What I like to do is I like to kind of ensure that we do cater for people who like to work in the gray areas, but also people who like a more structured area. So some design thinking frameworks try to squeeze the time frame very narrow, but I always think that when it comes to this part, especially when you're trying to align problems across multiple business units, as you could be doing in a digital transformation where you're rolling out, an AI platform across multiple different business units. What you really want to do at this stage, I think, is give people space and time to take away the problem. After you've had the brain ideation sessions, the brain dump sessions, after you've just kind of given the inspiration and the explosion of ideas there, and you put them all up on the board, the Miro board, and they have that, leave people take it away, leave people digest it, leave people put time in their own calendars to spend a half day absorbing it and really thinking about the other ideas that are on the board, not just their own ideas, and let them let it sink in, and don't force a decision too early. Don't force a set of actions, because when you're forced on a set of actions, people are thinking what I need to do to achieve those actions. So they're kind of like decisions, really. They're just not done yet. So yeah, I think from design thinking perspective, you let that float for a while, you let that absorb into people, and then you come back, do a quick kind of a half-hour refresh of what was done the last time with regards to problems, and now you're into solutioning. So you're really well. Sorry, actually, now you're down into you have diverged. Now you're converging. You're really focusing on what maybe the top three aspects of your problem are. What are the top three things you're going to really tackle for this problem? And what you're trying to do now here is you're trying to make the best of all this ideation that's come into place, and you're trying to focus on what's achievable here. So this is kind of more realistic areas here you're talking about. You're knocking out ideas that maybe just the company isn't ready for yet, the culture isn't ready for yet, the technology isn't ready for yet. Hopefully there's a few of those in there. And you're focusing on you're focusing on maybe the top three kind of things that could really hit top value for money, that could really hit top customer delights, and things like that.
And what about budget? I mean, when is budget entering the conversation? We haven't mentioned it yet, but I imagine that pretty early in this design thinking process, budget will be taken into account, right?
Yeah, budget should be there straight away, before you ever get into it. I mean, I would never engage with a client unless I kind of knew, or I set the kind of outline of what the budget is for the effort that I'm going to do for them. And I think it's the same with technology as well. Obviously, if you have larger efforts or larger initiatives, there's going to be a bit more flexibility about where you put the budget. I think at the design thinking stage, it's always a tricky one, because nobody ever wants to pay for design. They just want to pay for the implementation team, and you've got all these kind of capacity-based implementation teams set up, and they're just waiting for work to come their way. I won't say they're already paid for. They have to prove their worth as well, obviously. But it's a little bit easier because they're set up already, and I've worked in that area as well, and it is easier. For the design, you're kind of trying to say to somebody, I'm going to do 10 designs. We're going to throw away 4 of them. We're going to put 3 of them in the backlog, and we will have 3 good designs working out of this. And they're going to say, what? 70% of the effort you're going to do is going to be wasted? And that's the sell with design, and it is, yeah.
So what is the perceived advantage or benefit of design thinking? Because to me it's clear, but maybe to others that don't see a lot of value in this hypothesis testing kind of workflow, it is a little bit more clear. Can you spell it out and share it with our audience?
I think it is where you see yourself in the world. Is what you'll see from the value of design thinking. If you want to reach the heights, if you want to be the top 10%, the top 5%, the top 1% of companies in the world, you need to explore these options. You need to be innovative. You need to have people coming in from outside your industry, showing you what they're doing, and you need to explore how these ideas, not only how they, I mean, we can all look at what the top companies in the world are doing, but how they apply to your organization. And the only way you'll actually figure that out, if they're culturally balanced with your organization, if they're a good fit, the only way you'll figure that out is if you build a prototype and give it to people. And that's the value of design thinking to me. It is it's to be able to give a prototype to the business that they can play with. And it could be, it doesn't even work. It's not a working prototype, but it gives them a feel and a sense of where it's going and what this can do. And it gives it a sense of what value it can deliver to the customer, what value it can deliver to the organization, what efficiencies can be got from it. And, it's a cheap kind of dirty prototype that's, you just do over the course of a week or something, after you've kind of settled on the problem and you've come in, you've ideated on solutions. Now you're working on the prototypes. And this is where, through the kind of setting the problems, ideating on the solutions, and by the time you get to the prototypes, you're down to your 3 out of 10 solutions here now for the prototypes, and you've decided to invest a bit of money on doing those 3 prototypes. just to set the context of where we are. So those 3 solutions that you're kind of brought to prototype stage, you're investing on those 3 solutions, whatever it's going to take, maybe 1 week or 2 weeks for each solution to be built, and you're examining the prototypes and you're saying, okay, these work, or what doesn't work with them, and how can we make them better.
I think this is precisely what one needs, especially when we're talking about AI prototyping, because AI prototyping is inherently complex and expensive. So if I had a way or a mechanism or a mind model that selects the best 2 or 3 prototypes to implement, I would save a lot of time and money. Can you elaborate a little bit more on how you select, or what is your evolutionary model that brings out or fleshes out those 1 or 2 or 3 top ideas to test with a demonstrator or a proof of concept? What are the criteria that you're using to do that?
Yeah, for sure. So that is if you go back to that problem statement and you've kind of defined what your problem is, you've explored all that area. You're going to try and set, before you actually move into solution, you're going to try and set some acceptance criteria with regards to what your solution looks like. And we'll take desirability, viability, and feasibility. Tom Brown made a living out of this stuff, and there's a reason for that. They're 3 very good ways to measure what you're getting out of it. And it depends on where you're working towards, I suppose. I mean, if you're working towards a kind of a new customer feature and you've found a market for that, you've done your feasibility, you've done your market research, desirability is probably going to be kind of really high up, your percentage there. Like, I mean, if you talk about those 3 as being 33% each, you might weight desirability a lot higher there. If you're just talking about maybe optimizing to get work done faster or to make a more customizable product, you might be talking about feasibility there, but you'll have some metrics around it, and that's very specific to different organizations, I think, with regards to what those metrics will be. Some of them will be just baseline budget, absolutely. What costs the least and gives the most value that we've measured so far. I have found in my experience that a lot of companies are not great at measuring value, as in they're not great at predicting what the value that something will deliver will be, and holding themselves accountable to that, because it's a bit of an inexact science. It's a very inexact science. You can do all the market research you want, but when you actually launch something, the results can be very different. But I think you need to document all that, and learn from it as well, because you'll be talking about doing multiple launches and regular launches and quicker launches and launches to alpha customers and beta customers, and what you really want to do is you want to learn from each of those experiences and get more accurate in your value proposition as well.
Interesting. Now, can we say that at this point in the design thinking workflow, we're reaching the easiest part, right? Because when we are developing a solution, a technical solution, when we are prototyping, when we are putting those prototypes in front of the beta tester or clients, if we have, as you mentioned, a learning framework that enables us to absorb data and insights from the users, then that's the easiest part, right? The technical part is always probably the easiest part. But then, I don't know what is your experience, but in my experience, the less straightforward part is once the launch is done, once the data comes in, it's really hard to determine whether or not there was a success story or a failure, and if there was a failure, what defined the failure and what defined success. Can you tell us a little bit more about how design thinking gives the instruments to decode the output or the outcomes of a POC or of an experiment in general?
Yeah. Again, there's lots of ways to go about this. For me, my personal choice would be to kind of maintain the narrative throughout the process. And what I mean by maintain the narrative is actually, actually document it as you go along, and document it not in a very formal kind of rigid documentation format, but tell the story as you're going along, and tell the story the way it's happened, and tell it from the perspective of your technology people, and tell it from the perspective of your business people. So right from when you start that design process, really exciting start to the story. We've got this objective from high up in the organization. They've given it to us. They've approved some budget for us to get kicked off, and we've decided to go down the design thinking route, and we've engaged with this great company to come along and facilitate it for us. And that's the start of the story. And I think whoever's leading that project, and this transformation management role is really kind of changing, I think, as well. Because they're the ones that are trying to facilitate all this changes in perspective in this conversation. But I think they're also part of their role is to tell the story, and it's no longer a PowerPoint presentation. It really is a narrative around, here's what we're doing, here's what we're set out to do. Do we think we'll be successful? I'm not sure, or we don't know. We haven't done this before in this organization, or we tried this before, it didn't work. Here's what we learned from it the last time we did it, and we've got to go ahead to go again. We're going to take those learnings into it. I think if you start writing those vignettes, those stories about each process that you go through, right from your selection, your ideation point of view, map it in with your Miro boards as well. I mean, they're a great visual artifact to bring along with that story, and picture books, they're just, they really kind of bring a story to life.
Sorry, just
Sure.
one important question that I would like to get answer for. At the end of a design thinking process or project, what are the typical outcomes? So what is there a decision making process regarding a future investment or new product launch, or maybe just canceling a specific program or a specific project innovation? So can you tell us a little bit more about what comes after the successful or unsuccessful conclusion of a design thinking initiative?
Yeah, for sure. So I think the decision-making process is continuous throughout each phase of the process, and that's how you select your ideas, and how you go from that kind of divergence of thought back into a more converged area. There'll always be a decision maker in that room. There's always someone nominated as a decision maker, and their role is to kind of absorb the opinions from everybody in the room, but also to kind of ultimately make the decision. And they're probably the people responsible for the budget, and it's only right that they're the ones that make the decision. A successful design thinking process, for me, depends on your maturity. I mean, just getting through an entire process is success enough for the first time you're doing it, in my view. I mean, you just think of what you're doing, everything that you've already explored, the amount of the coverage that you've now done, where you were kind of panicking with regards to the external environments, organizations, where everybody else is at, where how far along we are in our technology journey. Now you've taken a big leap into it, and over the course of 4 weeks, you've covered some huge ground. You've uncovered some massive options. And maybe you don't have a concrete kind of you'd be doing very well to get a concrete product out of one of those, with regards to something that you could bring to implementation. You really would be doing very well, but you've probably got enough to kind of go for round two, and that would be kind of going back through the business people again and saying, here's the learnings we have, here's the story we have, and we'll go again. Ultimately, where you would want to get, I suppose, if you do maybe a couple of rounds of this, over the course of, whatever, 10 to 12 weeks, you would like to have had an assessment done across, maybe like 10 key ideas picked. These would be kind of the metrics that you'd be looking at, 10 key ideas picked. I mean, it depends. I mean, you should have 6 of those thrown out. You should be that picky. It depends on where you want to be. But if you want to be the top, the mediocre ideas, the ones that kind of they sound great, and they're maybe not mediocre. Maybe they're just something's not right for them yet. So they're either gone, or they're backlogged, or they're there. But the journey you've come on to get them is there. The experience you've learned from them is there, and the decisions you made along the way is there. 4 of these projects are going into prototype, and probably only one of these launch. It's expensive. It's expensive to go into delivery. You're talking about, an actual product here now that's actually going to be developed, and it's going to go to the business. But I suppose what you'd often see as well along the way is where you have those decisions and those prototypes, you don't always necessarily just take that one prototype into launch. That prototype could become a merge of 2 or 3 different key ideas from 4 or 5 different prototypes, or 4 or 5 different ideas that came along the way. So it's a real filtering process, and you're bringing along the best of what you've thought of. You're not really dropping any value there. Anything that's still got value, anything that brings in more money than it costs to build, is still being brought along.
And just out of curiosity, I wonder if AI brings additional challenges with respect to traditional design thinking projects. Are there other dimensions that make the design thinking process more complicated, or more challenging, or more time consuming?
I think there is a tendency with AI to focus on solutioning very, very quick. I think people have a go-to with regards to what they're going to use AI for already. And I think it's very unfair on the technology itself, because you're kind of straight away putting constraints around what you're going to use it for, what you're going to do with it. And you're also kind of saying, I'm not changing my business process here. I know what I want AI to do, and it fits into this sub process here, and it fits into this little process here, and that's what I wanted to do. I wanted to recognize phrases from a PDF. That's all I wanted to do. And you're kind of thinking, it's a little bit of a disappointing aspiration to have gone into a project, I think. Whereas if you kind of want to say, we spend an inordinate amount of effort translating these documents, and we want to optimize this process. We think maybe AI might be a solution, but maybe not. Maybe there's some other solution out there, but we're going to look at it, and then you start with your design thinking phase, and you bring in the open-mindedness, and you kind of say, well, if we translate it to one language, you don't need to use AI anymore, because do all that paraphrasing, all that sort of stuff. For these really heavy technical documents, if we translate it into one language, we don't need the AI anymore, because we're just using a translator then for the rest of it, kind of things like that, rather than translating each individual language. And that's a very simplistic, oversimplified version of solutioning before you actually do the design part of it.
Thank you. This is I think you're touching a very key aspect of AI projects, which is impact on pre-existing business processes, because AI is a complicated beast. It requires a lot of flexibility from the point of view of the receiver, and there are many implications. We're talking about processes, but we should also talk about the human factors here. When we are delivering specific to specific verticals, you mentioned healthcare, but also financial services. There are ethical implications. There are legal implications that are very difficult to solve, especially if the AI is taking decisions in behalf of a third party. So I imagine that all these kind of facets are taken into account when you are engaging your clients in the design thinking process, right? Because software is an almost exact science, but AI and machine learning they cannot be fully deterministic sometimes, and they are probabilistic machines. Sometimes they behave in a certain way, sometimes they behave in another way. So how this additional risk is perceived by your clients? Do you have any examples of projects you delivered maybe where there were these pain points, and how do you address these pain points with design thinking?
Yeah, it's definitely, in both of those industries, it's definitely the most difficult challenge, I think, for widespread adoption of AI. And I think the term you used there is very good. They're probabilistic rather than deterministic. I think what people don't realize is that people are probabilistic rather than deterministic as well. So it's not that the AI is necessarily performing any poorer than a person would be, but yeah, I think it does scare people in the business world a lot when you kind of say that, I have this level of accuracy, and you're able to put a very pinpoint. You're able to pinpoint the level of accuracy very clearly, and they're like, oh, it's not 100%. And that does kind of think, because when I check it, it's 100%, and it's well, it's probably not, like, but that's the human error is kind of more difficult thing to measure or to absorb. But I think the transparency is probably something that's key as well. I think people can get over the accuracy thing if they can see I'd say reporting. Yeah, I'd say reporting, certainly from the finance point of view anyways. They want to see reporting at each sub stage. Whilst I think the technologists just want to say, you don't need all that thing in the mid stages. It does it all end to end, and you just have this neatly delivered, nice looking visual at the end of it all. But the people who are doing the business process, they say, no, I want to see from point A to B to C to D, and I want to be able to see how it's going at each way, because I want to be able to see if there's any errors along the way. And the technologist then argument is like, well, you don't need to see the errors there, because the technology will fix the errors along the way. Most people say, I don't believe you.
But this is natural, because the minute you're replacing a human or a human-led process with a machine-led process, you expect to have the same kind of accuracy and the same kind of reporting as you mentioned. In a sense, I imagine that your clients want to see inside the black box. They want to understand what's going on, and they want to understand the thought process that leads, that generates outputs or certain outputs given a certain input. Let me ask another interesting question, and you might appreciate the fact that we are in downtown Dublin, so we have a lot of interesting background noises. Anyway, I was wondering, what are the 2 or 3 things that are necessary to start a design thinking project? So let's get to the other end. So what are the typical things that as a stakeholder I need beyond my team and my aspiration to start a design thinking project?
Okay, yeah. Well, when you immediately phrase the question, I was going to say team and aspiration are definitely the 2 that I would say off the top of my head. But so beyond those, what are the things I need? Yeah, it's
maybe some level of documentation, some level of some sort of ground terrain where the design thinking project can land and grow.
Yeah. I think framing what area the business that you're going to actually target is probably a good start. So especially for larger organizations, what process do you think is, if you have some kind of information or some analysis, maybe you've done some 6 Sigma analysis on your processes already, and you kind of know where you can get the best. And this would be purely from an optimization point of view. You can know where you get the best optimization from. If you're a large organization and you have multiple budgets for innovation, it'd be a really smart move to have some of your budget towards more disruptive efforts. I'd be a huge proponent of organizations teaming up with, in kind of like, ventures with other smaller organizations, and using the digital ecosystem that's out there to team up with them, and creating these kind of spin-off, not necessarily spin-offs, but they can belong to the organization, but creating these kind of smaller hubs, because the way you approach innovation, you can either do it from within the current organization, but that way you have to absorb the culture of the organization, and you have to really take that into account as you move along. It's going to be a lot slower and the change that you can do is going to be a lot more limited, because people are embedded in it. Whilst if you kind of decide that, no, look, screw this industry is absolutely messed up, we need a better way to do things. And I can
Right.
see it in other industries, the way it's working, and it's working much better. And if we don't do it, they'll do it. So then you would be probably much better off going down the road of setting up your own innovation labs, your own hubs, and really kind of even separate the budget, separate it as a separate operating company from the organization would be the most ideal way to do it, because it has its own autonomy then, and it has its own way to move forward. Whilst if it's always going to be just another innovation effort underneath some sort of business unit area, within large organizations, it's going to get consumed by some other innovation effort from some other business unit, and it's going to have a limited life cycle, I suppose.
And these models of outsourced innovation are now well tested. We see examples in pretty much every industry, from pharma to automotive to sport technology. I discovered that Real Madrid has an innovation initiative. They are teaming up with startups for bringing to their industry a novel technology for increasing engagement with fans, or better analyzing the performance of their athletes. So this is now almost standard practice, Paudie. What do you think?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, it's a fantastic way to work, because it's a fantastic way for our large organizations to absorb the culture of the area that they're in, the actual geographical area that they're in, by teaming up with the larger ecosystem. It's a great way to support kind of the ecosystem, the place that you're in. But most predominantly, it's a great way to get things done, because we know that these startups and that these companies that come in to work for larger industries, they work faster, they work more efficiently, they work more effectively, because they have that flexibility and that size, that they can really kind of focus their efforts, and they don't have to worry about taking 6 months to add a headcount. They just get someone in and it's done, and decision making is a lot quicker. And I think the level of expertise that these companies can attract is a lot better, because they're a lot more attractive for the top technologists to work for. They don't want to be working in these, working on, some sort of a mainframe or something like that. They want to be working in some more exciting technology. And the same with the business. Then I think, I think having your business, if they're inside in their own environments with their own people the whole time, then it's going to be very hard to kind of bring them into this design thinking process. But if you can actually bring them out into a separate area, I'm talking about a separate physical location, now that we can all go to physical locations again. But if you can actually second them for a month, so that they can't use the excuse of checking calendars and having meetings to duck out of this type of thing. I think if you can focus that type of effort, then you can get some real quick traction. And that's really for if you're going down the disruptive area, I think. And that's where people should be going.
Yeah, I fully 100%. I fully agree with you, Paudie. Listen, we are getting towards the end of this discussion, and I wonder. We always ask this question: what are the next projects or next big challenges for you, Padraig, and Innovation on Demand? What are the project that you're going to be busy with the next 6 to 12 months? Do you predict any changes to the current status quo? Do you see anything exciting coming ahead for you and your company?
I think move to cloud is definitely huge. I think most large organizations have a significant effort if they're not already in the cloud already. But I think tapping into what you can leverage in the cloud as a service, as something that you don't actually have to build, you don't actually have to build out, is something that's key. And I think it's grabbed the imagination of larger organizations, because it's the as a service model, isn't it? So rather than just to go back to my very basic example of a translator or something, so rather than go build my own translator, I just get one as a service, or you kind of plug all your different services together into systems and subsystems and systems. So I think that's an exciting area. I think what's built in the cloud and the ecosystem of providers in the cloud is an exciting area.
And this is going to be even more exciting because AI is going to be a feature, a plugin. Once you are in the cloud, all your data and customers are accessing your services in the cloud. Then AI is already there. It is deployable on demand. So this is even an easier sell.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. And I think with the focus on GDPR and the focus on moving data into the one kind of single area and having control and management over your data, I think that really does help efforts, because I think nearly every organization now has a really good idea of exactly where every bit of their data is.
And very final question. We still have time for one question. Would you be able to suggest an interesting book? You were mentioning before Tom Brown. Any resource book that can help our audience to understand a little bit more about design thinking or agile methodology? Any title that comes to mind?
Yeah, there's a book called Serious Play, which I read, which is one of the earlier books I read in my life, and I can't for the life of me think of the author now.
But don't worry. What we can do is we can share it offline with our audience in the description below, so that this could be the first step towards an interesting journey. Paudie, this was fantastic. I really appreciate the time that you dedicated to us. I really think that there is a lot of insights and a lot of interesting material to rethink your innovation strategy. And if somebody wants to reach out, what is the best way to do it? Is that maybe an email or a I don't know, a message on your Twitter account? What is it?
You've got so innovationondemand.ie is the website, and Paudie at innovationondemand.ie is the email address. So yeah.
Fantastic. Paudie, listen, let's close here. Thanks very much. Have a great day. And for all our audience, you will find a lot of information and descriptions on how to start with design thinking and how to reach Paudie in the description below.
Cool. Thank you very much, Luca. Thank you for what you do.
Thank you.